In our headlines on this Wednesday, March 4th, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung attends the Korea-Philippines Business Forum in Manila earlier today, calling for productive partnership in manufacturing, energy and infrastructure. Meanwhile, Iran is launching a fierce air assault against regional U.S. military bases as well as American diplomatic facilities. Israel and other Gulf nations are also under attack. Accordingly, the government here begins evacuating South Korean nationals and ethnic Koreans from Iran and Israel to relatively safer neighboring nations as the violence in the Middle East escalates. We start in Manila today with team coverage of President Lee Jae-myung's agenda there. Now, earlier today, he took part in a business forum between South Korea and the Philippines. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
Manufacturing, energy, and infrastructure. What President Lee Jae-myung sees as the driving forces of cooperation between South Korea and the Philippines.
그동안 양국 관계가 굳건히 발전해온 데에는 오늘 이 자리에 계시는 경제인 여러분의 역할이 매우 컸다는 점을 알고 있습니다. 앞으로도 통찰력 있는 판단과 과감한 도전으로 새로운 기회를 열어주시기를 부탁드립니다.
During his final day in Manila, President Lee took part in the Korea-Philippines Business Forum. The event brought together government officials and major business leaders from both countries. They include the heads of South Korea's Lotte Group and HD Hyundai, as well as the Philippines' SM Prime Holdings and Alliance Global. In his congratulatory remarks, Lee highlighted the strong potential for the two countries to join hands in manufacturing by leveraging their respective strengths.
필리핀은 니켈, 코발트 같은 핵심 광물을 보유하고 있으며 한국은 반도체와 전기, 전자 등 첨단 산업 제조 기술을 가지고 있습니다. 조선 분야 역시 협력 잠재력이 매우 큽니다.
On energy, Lee said South Korea could play a key role in the Philippines' plan to introduce commercial nuclear power plants by 2032, citing Korea's world-class reactor technology and clean energy capabilities. Regarding infrastructure, he expressed confidence that logistics projects modernizing ports and railways in the Philippines involving Korean firms will boost the local economy once completed. Wednesday's forum resulted in the signing of 7 memorandums of understanding.
All of these will ripple into significant partnerships that will generate projects, investments, and, of course, livelihood.
Among them are agreements to introduce new nuclear power plants and train skilled shipbuilding workers in the Philippines. The Blue House says the Korea-Philippines Business Forum marks the first business gathering of its kind in the ASEAN region since President Lee took office last June. This underscores the Philippines' growing importance as a key economic partner for South Korea in ASEAN. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Today's business forum came after Tuesday's elaborate welcoming ceremony for the South Korean presidential delegation by its Philippine host. Arirang's Yoon Jung-min files this report from Manila.
The summit in Manila began with an official welcome for the South Korean first couple, with the Korean folk song Arirang sung by a local choir. Tuesday's talks between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Ferdinand Marcos Jr. coincided with the anniversary of when the two countries established diplomatic relations 77 years ago. The leaders noted the sacrifice of troops sent from the Philippines during the Korean War.
대한민국의 자유와 평화를 위해서 목숨을 바쳐 함께 싸워준 우리 필리핀 참전 용사들에게 존경과 감사의 마음을 전합니다.
That bond, cemented in solidarity during very difficult times, continues to guide our strategic partnership.
Building upon the friendship, a pledge was made for cooperation in the defense industry, as well as promising sectors such as nuclear energy, critical minerals, shipbuilding, and AI.
필리핀 바탄 원전 재개 타당성 조사 결과 및 신규 원전 사업 도입 협력 MOU를 기초로 양국은 최적의 원전 협력 파트너로 자리매김하게 될 것입니다.
I expressed appreciation for the Republic of Korea's invaluable assistance and contributions to the modernization of our armed forces and strengthening of our Coast Guard, the investments that help revive our shipbuilding industry.
MOUs were signed for cooperation on a range of areas, including digital technology, science, Korean language, and cultural exchanges. The leaders also addressed peace on the Korean Peninsula and the conflict in the Middle East.
영내 정세와 함께 최근 중동의 상황에 대해서 논의하였고 중동의 안정과 평화가 조속히 회복되기를 소망하였습니다.
We both recognize the growing uncertainty in geopolitical developments, which is why we agreed on the need to firmly and consistently uphold a rules-based order governed by international law.
The South Korean first couple was later hosted by their Philippine counterparts for a state dinner. Top office officials say President Lee's trip is also aimed at reaching out to the broader ASEAN region at a time of increased global uncertainties. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Manila.
Meanwhile, also on this Wednesday in Manila, President Lee Jae-myung sat down with Koreans living in the Philippines and vowed a concerted campaign to protect them from crime. He also thanked the Philippine government and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. for creating a Korean help desk at local police stations. Separately, he added that he had asked for the extradition of a Korean national currently imprisoned in the Philippines. The individual in question has allegedly been trafficking drugs into South Korea from behind bars via telegram. In the Middle East, a fierce exchange of fire unfolds as the U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran centers on the latter's strategic facilities, while Tehran targets Israel as well as American military bases and its diplomatic compounds in Gulf nations. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
With the Operation Epic Fury entering its fifth day, the U.S. and Israel have targeted Iran's strategic assets. The Israel Defense Forces announced it destroyed the secret Minzadeh underground nuclear facility east of Tehran, stating the site was used to develop key components for nuclear weapons.
In these headquarters, a group of nuclear scientists operated covertly, advancing and developing capabilities and knowledge towards obtaining nuclear weapons.
The International Atomic Energy Agency also confirmed that joint strikes damaged the entrance buildings of the Natanz fuel enrichment plant, though the watchdog noted no radiological consequences are expected. The U.S. military stated that joint U.S. and Israeli forces have struck over 1,700 targets across Iran within 72 hours of the operation's start. Washington has deployed B-2 stealth bombers and B-52 long-range strategic bombers, which are capable of carrying bunker-buster munitions, to intensify strikes on Iran's underground infrastructure. In retaliation, Iran has launched a counteroffensive firing ballistic missiles at the Israeli mainland. Iranian drones have targeted U.S. military bases and diplomatic outposts, striking installations in Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. The exchanges have resulted in a growing number of casualties. The Pentagon has confirmed the first American combat fatalities, announcing that 6 U.S. soldiers were killed and at least 18 others wounded in drone strike at Port Shuaiba in Kuwait. At least 10 people have been killed in Israel. In Iran, the death toll has reached 787 according to the Iranian Red Crescent as of Wednesday morning local time. The figure includes Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and Davoud Ali Zadeh, a senior commander of the Quds Force. The U.S. and Israel also bombed the Assembly of Experts building in Qom, while the senior clerics are tasked with choosing a new supreme leader. Amid the power vacuum, the New York Times reports that Mojtaba Khamenei, the late Ayatollah's second son, is the most likely successor. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And while war rages in the Middle East, pundits believe the Trump administration is standing on shaky ground in its attempt to justify its sudden strike against Iran. Our Chung Hye-rim reports on the rationale thus far.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he believed Iran was preparing to strike first, describing that assessment as a key reason for launching the U.S. military campaign, adding that the U.S. drove the timeline.
It was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand.
During an interview with ABC News, Trump also suggested that Iran attempted to assassinate him and argued the strikes were necessary to eliminate what he called imminent threats from Tehran. Speaking to reporters ahead of classified briefings on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio insisted that Trump decided Iran could no longer hide behind its missile program. He also stated the bottom line was that the U.S. determined it was not going to get hit first. But Rubio's explanation appeared to contrast with remarks he made earlier on Monday when he said the United States acted partly because it expected Israel to strike Iran and feared Tehran would retaliate against American forces. This contradiction has fueled debate among analysts over whether the imminent threat to the U.S. was genuine. Meanwhile, questions are mounting over the administration's long-term objectives. Trump has actively urged Iranians to overthrow their government, but stated otherwise on who would be the next leader.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead.
With shifting timelines and evolving justifications from top officials, the Trump administration's endgame in the Middle East remains increasingly uncertain. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the government here has been quick to seek the safety of its people in the Middle East. In fact, evacuation operations of South Korean nationals in Iran and Israel have begun. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
South Korea's foreign ministry says about 140 South Koreans and ethnic Koreans have safely evacuated from Iran and Israel to neighboring countries. According to the ministry on Tuesday, 24 people in Iran, including South Korean nationals, departed Tehran early Tuesday aboard buses arranged by the Korean embassy. After traveling east and staying overnight at a stopover, they crossed the border Wednesday evening and safely entered Turkmenistan. The evacuees include Korean residents, several embassy staff and their family members, as well as some Iranian nationals who are relatives of Korean citizens. Among those who left Iran were Iranian women's national volleyball team coach Lee Do-hee and footballer Lee Gi-jae, who plays for an Iranian club. Meanwhile, 66 others in Israel were evacuated to Egypt. They departed Tel Aviv and Jerusalem on embassy-arranged buses, with additional short-term visitors joining them at the border, bringing the total to 113 evacuees. They have safely cleared the Israel-Egypt border crossing and will travel to Cairo, with support from embassy officials and a rapid response team dispatched from Seoul. The Foreign Ministry says it will continue exploring additional evacuation options if needed, and stressed it remains committed to ensuring the safety of South Korean nationals in the region. Prime Minister Kim Min-seok has also instructed officials to prepare measures for short-term travelers in the Middle East who are stranded due to airport closures, suggesting that military transport aircraft could be deployed if necessary.
I ask that you thoroughly prepare guidance for short-term visitors returning home, provide consular assistance, and ensure transportation plans are in place in case of emergencies.
The Defense Ministry says it's preparing to immediately deploy military transport aircraft if the government requests support. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae-myung will convene an extraordinary cabinet meeting tomorrow, that is Thursday, to address the fallout of the U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran. According to the Blue House, the Ministries of Finance and Foreign Affairs will brief the president on the broader ripple effects of the events unfolding in the Middle East as they seek possible response measures. Also, pundits continue to draw links between the events unfolding in the Middle East and future potential events here on the Korean Peninsula. Our An Sung-jin explains.
U.S. military operations against Iran came amid ongoing nuclear negotiations and are allegedly aimed at regime change. However, the effect of these will echo far beyond the Middle East. The crisis does not immediately raise the risk of a direct military conflict on the Korean Peninsula, but it may raise alarms from two different aspects, reshaping the broader strategic and military landscapes on the Korean Peninsula. Developments in the Middle East could further harden the confrontation between the U.S. and its alliances, including South Korea and Japan on one side, and North Korea, China, and Russia on the other.
The situation in Iran right now is leading to a power balance struggle. What happens there isn't only affecting Western nations, but it will also influence other U.S. alliances in Asia, which may reshape the regional power dynamic.
Such polarization may reinforce North Korea's nuclear strategy, deepening long-term tensions on the Korean Peninsula. And this intersects with the Trump administration's push for strategic flexibility of the U.S. forces Korea. This initiative seeks to expand the operational scope of American troops stationed in South Korea from beyond deterring North Korea to deployments across the broader Indo-Pacific region. If the conflict is further prolonged in Iran, some USFK assets could be redeployed to the Middle East, hurting the peninsula's security posture.
What we might need is a careful understanding of the initiative and, if needed, looking for ways to amend it.
Bilateral security negotiations between Seoul and Washington are also showing signs of strain, with initiatives on nuclear-powered submarines and revisions to the bilateral nuclear cooperation agreement allegedly being delayed again. The planned visit to South Korea by the U.S. negotiating delegation was initially set for January, but was postponed to late February or early March. This, too, had been recently rescheduled for mid-March following U.S.-bound investment issues. However, with the U.S. strike on Iran, overall consultations on alliance security cooperation have been put on hold. Tensions in the Middle East are less likely to produce a direct conflict on the Korean Peninsula. But Seoul may have to brace itself for a more unpredictable security environment, with heightened strategic uncertainty on the peninsula in the months ahead. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The local bourse remains vulnerable to the volatility in the Middle East. In fact, the benchmark KOSPI began its trade today with a free fall. Our Kim Jun-ong covers that plunge and more.
War fears in Iran sent shockwaves through South Korea's stock market, leaving the country's benchmark indexes with double-digit losses. The KOSPI opened 3.4% lower and extended losses through the morning, eventually triggering a circuit breaker after the index stayed down more than 8% for over a minute, halting trading for 20 minutes. The index closed at 5,093.54, plunging more than 12% from the previous session and falling back to the 5,000 level. The Kosdaq also remained under pressure. The index opened 2.25% lower than the previous day and extended its losses, triggering its first sell-side sidecar of the year. The decline continued, eventually prompting a circuit breaker late in the morning and sending the index below the 1,000 level. With Middle East tensions shaking markets across Asia, attention is turning to why South Korea's stock market has been hit particularly hard.
Among major energy-dependent economies, South Korea's market had risen the most since the start of the year. The recent decline reflects a pullback from those gains.
Major heavyweights, including Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and Hyundai Motor, all moved lower, while defense stocks that had surged the previous day fell sharply on profit-taking. Unlike Tuesday, when bargain buying briefly appeared, selling pressure continued on Wednesday as market anxiety intensified. Despite the steep decline, analysts say a rebound remains possible, depending on additional triggers.
If some of the uncertainties begin to ease or a trigger emerges, a quick recovery seems possible. In that process, foreign buying will be crucial, and that will largely depend on moves in the $1 exchange rate.
Meanwhile, the Korean won briefly rose above 1,500 during trading, meeting one of the worst-case conditions, while uncertainty remains over how the Middle East conflict and global oil prices will unfold. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
Also, on the local front, industrial output edged down in January, breaking 2 months of gains as a dip in chip production dampened overall manufacturing activity. According to the data ministry, production in all industries plunged 1.3% in January on month to mark the first decline in 3 months. Output in the mining and manufacturing sectors surrendered 1.9%, driven by a 4.4% plunge in semiconductor production. Now, in contrast, retail sales rose 2.3% for a second straight month, while facility investment rebounded 6.8%. In other news now, AI inclusion is no longer a choice but a necessity in smartphones. This is according to companies at this year's Mobile World Congress. Our correspondent Park Junan reports from Barcelona.
The Mobile World Congress 2026 in Barcelona is showcasing the rapid evolution of smartphones, with AI-integrated devices captivating tech enthusiasts from around the world. Among the standout attractions was from Chinese company Honor, which showed off its robot phone. The most creative feature was its attached robot camera, which includes an interactive AI camera module that tracks the user's movements, engages in conversation, and responds to requests such as playing a song while dancing. Could you play me a song? After listening to my question, it played an upbeat song and moved its camera module, dancing along to the music. The next stop was South Korea's biggest tech company, Samsung Electronics' latest smartphone S26 series, which features its Galaxy AI.
Smartphones are built to be smart, but with AI features, they could become much smarter.
The company emphasized advanced features like personalized suggestions, enhanced reminders, and agentic AI tools. One feature that got a lot of attention was the privacy display on the S26 Ultra, which limits the viewing angle to prevent others from peeking, made possible by controlling light diffusion at the hardware level. Yet amid the excitement over these AI capabilities, questions arise about whether their premium pricing truly justifies the innovations and whether these capabilities meaningfully improve daily life. The Galaxy S26 Ultra starts at around $1,300 in the US, while China's ultra-premium lineups cost up to $2,000 to $3,000. This contrasts with American tech giant Apple, which took the opposite approach with its March announcement of the more affordable iPhone 17e, starting at $599.
So AI is the future, and we really have to adopt it because it will make our lives really, really easy. But it's very important that we are offering solutions for everyone and that we can bring value to people that are willing to spend $200 or are willing to spend more.
The takeaway from MWC 2026 is clear. AI is becoming a visible partner. And from trifold designs that expand screen space to cinema-grade lenses developed through collaborations with luxury camera brands, hardware is being designed with AI in mind. Park Junan, Arirang News, Barcelona.
Most parts of Korea had bright spring weather. Despite chilly morning temperatures, afternoon highs climbed above 10 degrees Celsius, leading to wide gaps in ratings. And tomorrow marks Gyeongchip, a seasonal milestone signaling the awakening of insects, and it's going to turn even warmer during the day before a brief cool snap returns this weekend. But unlike today, we'll have cloudy skies in the capital area for most of the day, with overnight rain in the forecast. Seoul, Daegu, Gwangju will begin the day at just 2 degrees Celsius. Then by the afternoon, Seoul and Busan will be getting up to 14 degrees, Jeju getting up to 15 degrees Celsius. And there's rain or snow in the forecast in central regions and the Jeollado provinces starting tomorrow night, expanding nationwide by the following morning, but mostly clear by the afternoon. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.